Hello and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Chris Mitchell. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Inflow Communications. So thanks for joining our webinar today. We're going to be talking about hunt groups and work groups, the differences and the best practices and functions for each of them, inside your ShoreTel Mitel Connect system for 14.2. All of the functionality is the same between 14.2 and Connect. So if you're on either one of them, it's not a problem here. So if you're new to our webinar series, thanks for joining. If you haven't had a chance, hit our website. You can see the rest of the webinars we have scheduled through this month. So we have a troubleshooting call, which is next week, which is awesome. It's going to be great. It's how to use Brightmetrics for troubleshooting of call issues. So you can look at, inside Brightmetrics, pull up call GUIDs and everything like that, from Brightmetrics. If you don't have Brightmetrics already and you're an Inflow customer, you can submit a support ticket over to our team and get that set up for you. Next week, we also have one put on by our customer success team. It's maximizing your Inflow support and success program benefits. So all the different stuff we include in our support plans and how you can take advantage and use those features. And then we have a contact center one next week, 5 ways to enhance your customer engagement using Twilio and ShoreTel. So, if you have a contact center, enterprise contact center thing with, from ShoreTel, how you can utilize Twilio to kind of supplement and add some more additional features onto that. So it'll be really cool, some cool ways to enhance your contact center without necessarily spending a ton of money to buy a bunch of new, third-party products or anything like that, to enhance that through SMS, surveys and stuff like that, email. There's some different ways you can use Twilio. So that'll be a nice 3 webinars coming up next week that you can register for, and probably in the next week and a half we'll be adding all of our September webinars to our website. So pay attention to those. You can register for some additional ones coming up. Quick agenda. I'll do an introduction on Inflow Communications, then I'll jump right into hunt groups. Then we'll follow up with work groups, and I save a little bit of time for Q&A at the end of the So if you're new to the webinars, who's Inflow Communications? We're a unifying communications and contact center company. That's all we do. We don't try to do anything outside of that around servers and desktop support, anything like that. We're a ShoreTel Mitel Platinum partner, which is the highest tier. We're ring-centric delivery partners. So for customers who are looking to do some cloud, we have a Mitel cloud offering. We have a ring-central cloud offering for PBXs. We're also a Genesys Pure Cloud Gold partner, which is their highest tier. So if you're looking for a cloud contact center, we have a Mitel Cloud Contact Center, and we also have the Genesys Pure Cloud. So, we offer some on-prem and some cloud-based solutions. We got about 50 employees spread out throughout 10 different states. So we provide nationwide service to our customers. We have currently over 200,000 ShoreTel endpoints with that spans 800 customers with locations nationwide and a ton of international locations even. We're maniacal about customer experience. We publish on our website our live support stats, so you can hop on there and see what our live answer time is, what our customer survey scores are, all that information live on our website. That's pulled from our phone system and from Salesforce. Our customers span all kinds of different markets, from food to real estate, all over the place. So regardless of what vertical you're in, we support all of your unified communication needs. All right, well, we're going to hop right into hunt groups. If you do have questions throughout this, feel free to post them into the questions portion, and I'll save some time at the end to answer those questions that you might have. So, all right. So with hunt groups, we have a lot of customers and cases that come in, trying to figure out even sales calls, sales engineering calls that talk about when should I use a hunt group, when should I use a work group. So that's really where this webinar topic came from, is to really go over the capabilities and limitations, and then some best practices around utilizing hunt groups and when to utilize them, hunt groups over work groups and vice versa. So with the hunt group, some of the capabilities that you can use on a hunt group is you do have limited ring patterns on a hunt group. You have 2 options. You have simultaneous ring and you have top down. So top down, obviously, if you put Chris in number 1, Luis in number 2, then Chris is going to get every single call unless Chris is busy. Then it'll roll to Luis and and work down the list. So the top person is always going to get the call if they're available, and then go down from there. The nice thing about the hunt groups is they are switch based. So all of the routing is local to on the switch. It doesn't have to reach out to any servers, look for anything. It has all the hunt group programming built into the switch. So for WAN connectivity issues, if your WAN goes down, that local switch can do all the hunt group routing to the for the phones of that site. So there is some nice redundancy capabilities, which being that it's switch based. One of the great capabilities is using a hunt group for backup to a work group for for DR purposes. You can build work groups and then use a hunt group, which is limited functionality as we're talking about some of the capabilities compared to a work group, but it's a great use to kind of back up your work group with the hunt group. One nice thing about the hunt group is that it does follow your call handling mode. So if you put yourself in in a meeting mode or something like that, the hunt group's going to see that you're in a meeting mode. It's not going to forward your calls to you. It'll just skip to the next user in the list, or if it's simultaneous ring, it just won't ring your phone at all. So nice capability to be able to make it easy to follow your call handling modes. You also get call waiting with hunt groups. So if you have maybe a small operator group or something who likes to say, hey, can you hold real quick and answer the next call as it's coming in? Hunt groups allow operators to see the next call ringing in on their phone, answer it, transfer it real quick, get back to the call they put on hold. So that is a nice functionality when you're, if you have a small operator group that needs to take multiple calls at a time. Some of the limitations, if you're doing simultaneous ring, it does have a limit of 16 people, so we can't ring more than 16 people at a time, and that just comes down to switch resources. Anytime we're ringing more, 16 phones, it produces a significant strain on the switches, especially if you have to take into account that switch might have multiple hunt groups on it, and if multiple hunt groups are all ringing 16 phones at a time, that puts a pretty high processor load on the switch itself. So there is a limitation on the number of simultaneous rings that users that you can put in each hunt group. With that, you do have some switch capacity issues. So on the right hand, the little image to the right of that shows your kind of your limitations. So on an SG switch, the limitation is 8 hunt groups per switch is the maximum capacity. And in those 8 hunt groups, if you have 8, the maximum capacity is 16 members, per hunt group on that. And what they do is they take those numbers, and every switch has a capacity to run 80 concurrent calls for hunt groups in there. So what they do is they take the number of hunt groups with the members in them, and then they multiply that by the number of calls each hunt group can handle. So let's just say you have one hunt group with 10 members in it, and then that hunt group has a capacity to take 8 concurrent calls. It takes 8 concurrent calls and times it by 10 users, and that gives you a capacity of 80 for that one hunt group. So that one hunt group of 10 users that has a capacity of 8 concurrent calls would actually max out a switch by itself. So typically what we recommend in that case is to lower the call stack size on the hunt group to say maybe 4, and say, okay, this hunt group can only take 4 calls at a time instead of 8, and then 4 times 10 gives you a call capacity of 40 calls concurrently instead of 80, and then you have additional capacity you can assign for other hunt groups. So that's really when we're looking at hunt group and switch capacity, that's how we're looking at it to make sure, okay, do we have too many hunt groups and users on particular switches? Do we need to load balance them more? The newer ST switches, if you have any of those, do have some higher switch capacity. They put some more memory and some more processing power into them, so they do have a higher threshold for the number of hunt groups and the number of members in in those hunt groups that you can put on there. So they do. If you have some of the newer switches, you have a little bit more capacity than if you have the older SG switches. But that is something to take into account. If you do have a lot of hunt groups, we need to make sure that we're load balancing those hunt groups or reducing the call stack size from the from the default down to maybe to 4 or something like that to make sure that those switches don't run out of processing power when they are taking multiple calls from different hunt groups. One of the limitations is limited reporting on the hunt groups, so we don't have as many Options for reporting, you get 5 or 6 different different settings or things that you can report on for a hunt group. So we don't have as much capacity if we're looking for more kind of a mini ACD reporting like we do in the work groups. The other thing that a lot of people wish hunt groups had is voicemail boxes. So as a hunt group takes a call, if it can't handle it, that's why I kind of screenshotted this top one here. As a call comes into a hunt group, it runs through, and from the very top of this top picture here, it says, call member when forwarding all calls, yes or no. Skip a member if they're already on the call. So this is how it's deciding to route the call. If the call stack is full, so it's already hit the 4 or 8 calls you have set, where is it going to send the call? And then no answer. So if nobody answered the call, where is it going to send it? So you have some different options. Since the hunt group doesn't have voicemail itself, you can create like a work group voicemail box and just use a work group just for voicemail purposes, like you see in this screenshot, general voicemail. Boom. We can create a secondary voicemail box and just use it, but it does create 2 different extensions. Your hunt group has an extension, and your voicemail box is going to have a separate extension on that. But that is, I would say, typically best practices, in there is just to use work groups anytime you need a voicemail box. The other thing is, you see like the on-hour schedule, the holiday schedule, but then you go down to the off-hours holiday destination, the voicemail box. You could also send that to an auto attendant, as well. So you can route those calls to auto attendant. Then the auto attendant could give an option to leave a voicemail as well to a work group voicemail box. So you have a little bit of flexibility on that. Even though the hunt group doesn't have voicemail, we can utilize the work group voicemail just for that, for that purpose. Once the call leaves the hunt group though, and goes to either a work group voicemail box or an auto attendant, we're no longer doing switch-based routing at that point. That will utilize either, if you don't have a server locally, it will utilize the WAN connection to route that call outbound over to a server at a different location. So that can leave your local site redundancy, give you a point of failure if you're trying to kind of build as much local site redundancy with the hunt groups. Once we go to the voicemail or auto attendant, we have to use a server for that case. So that's why hunt groups are really good for remote locations, though, is they can handle all the kind of the day-to-day call processing, inbound calls, ringing of phones, everything like that. And then we only need minimal server capabilities. The other really nice thing you can do with hunt groups for redundancy purposes is if you have maybe a little bit bigger site, or maybe a site that's close by, is if we're worried about this, the switch having a problem or something like that, we can also copy that hunt group and make a duplicate hunt group and store it on a different switch. So that for redundancy purposes, we can have the same hunt group maybe named as, one is customer service and one is customer service backup. Assign them to different switches. And then what you do is you set the backup extension on each of the hunt groups to each other so that you can create some kind of redundancies with your hunt groups if you need to roll calls between multiple switches. If you have spare switches in your system, that's another way to provide redundancy for your hunt groups. Switch goes down, the hunt group and the phones will fail over to one of your spare switches and provide you redundancy, for the hunt groups. So there's a couple ways to provide you redundancy to your hunt groups so that you can still route calls in case you have an outage in that case. So couple good uses there for hunt groups. We typically see hunt groups used for small departments who maybe want a simultaneous ring, or maybe a small operator group who want call waiting. That's typically what we see the hunt groups being utilized for the most. All right, so now we're going to hop over to work groups and kind of talk through what the work group can do that the hunt group can't do. In some use cases, for the work group. So work groups give you a few more capabilities when it comes to ring pattern. You still get the simultaneous ring in the top down that you have on hunt groups, but they add you 2 more options. They add round robin. So round robin is, you have agent 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the first call that comes in, we're going to present it to agent 1. The second call to agent 2. Third call to agent 3. And we just kind of work, around trying to load balance it as much as possible, for each user. pretty common. Longest idle is the most common when it comes to work groups. Longest idle means, whichever user has been off the phone the longest, present them with the next call. So it's not necessarily giving everybody the same number of calls. It's trying to even out, talk times. So the user who, maybe they took a call last, but it was a really short call compared to somebody who, was on a 10 or 20-minute call. It goes off of the idle time on that. So I would say that one's the most common. Round robin is second, and then simultaneous ring would be the third popular. With work groups, one really nice thing is you have call queuing. So we call work groups kind of mini ACD, so you can utilize it if you don't need a full contact center, but you need some ACD features. We have call queuing. So we have 5 different steps that we can do. Step 1, 2, 3, and then the last step. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the last step is the 5th one. And each of the steps can have a different greeting. So we can, thank you for calling Inflow Communications. Your call will be answered in the order it was received. Then we can play hold music. The next one can come on and say, your call is very important to us. Please stay in line for the next available agent. You can control how much hold music plays between the steps, what the greetings are, and you can even announce estimated wait time. So maybe when they enter and we queue up, it says your estimated wait time is 2 minutes. What it does is it looks at the last 10 calls and what was their estimated wait time and talk time, and then multiplies it by the number of calls in front of the, in the queue in front of them. It gives them an estimated wait time. Not extremely accurate because it's only looking at the last 10 calls, and so sometimes the last 10 calls are fast or longer than normal, but it does give them a decent estimate on the wait time that they're looking at. You have significantly more reporting capabilities on the work group. I said the hunt group had 5 or 6. The work group gives you, I think, between 20 and 30 different settings or things you can report on when it comes to work groups. With the work groups also comes the voicemail box. So we have the queuing capability. One of the queuing options is, maybe when they're listening to a greeting, it says, if you'd like to leave a message, press 1. They can press 1, and we can just transfer them right to the mailbox. With the work group voicemail box is any user who, is part of that work group can then see the voicemail boxes as, available to them as well. See that voicemail box. So you have one voicemail that can be accessed by everybody in that, in that work group, and they manage it as a group. One person listens to it, it gets marked as listens for everybody in the group. One user deletes it, it gets deleted for everybody in the group. So you do have the shared voicemail capabilities of the work group as well. From a limitation standpoint, it is a server-based. Work groups are all server-based, so you do have, we have to have the server has to be up and running in order to route that, or do we need the queuing on that case? So we do have some limitations around, being that they're server-based. So you can see the image there is each system can have 256 work groups total. We have a couple customers who are, I would say probably have 100 or 200 of them. I haven't had any customer who's hit the maximum number of work groups yet. There is a maximum number of members or agents in a work group, and that's 300. Obviously, 300 doesn't work in simultaneous because you can still only do 16, people in a simultaneous ring. But you could have 300 for longest idle, or round robin. Some of those ones. Top down wouldn't do any good either because you're not going to ring. You're not going to get the 300 agents in a top down setup. There is a work group agent limit per system at this time too. So it's 300 agents spread across your 256 work groups. Obviously, agents can be members of multiple work groups or anything like that, but there is a limitation. I don't have any customers who are getting close to that. And the main reason they limit that is if you have that many work group agents, you probably need to be looking at a full contact center solution. We talked about the 16 simultaneous ring. Then we can do overflow. We have overflow capabilities, but we have a maximum number of calls in queue as well. So 254 calls per server is the maximum capacity that each server has for call queuing. So if you have multiple servers with work groups, each server can handle 254 calls at a time. That's a lot of calls. I've never ran into an issue with the number of calls that can be queued at a time. Another limitation on workgroups is we don't have call waiting. So it's one call at a time. If an agent is talking to their mom on the phone, it sees that they're on the phone and we're not going to present them with a call. If an agent's checking their voicemail, we see that they're on the phone and we won't present them a call at all. So all it tracks is phone state. It's, oh, they're on the phone. It doesn't care who they're talking to. It won't send them a call until they hang up that call. So sometimes that's an issue. People like call waiting, but with the workgroups, it's one call at a time capability. Licensing, this is probably the biggest thing we run into with workgroups is there's licensing required if you want your agents to be able to log in and out, or if you want a supervisor to be able to see the supervisor tools, on that case. So there is a license cost for the ability to log in and out. You don't have to buy a license for users. So if you have agents who maybe just need to be put into a workgroup and they answer calls 8 to 5 and they don't ever log in or out, you don't have to buy licensing for those users. You only have to buy licensing if they need to be able to log in and out. Say, oh, I need to stop taking calls for half the day, so I need to log out so my phone doesn't ring. That's where you would need a license, for people that need to jump in and out of the work group and maybe not take calls, every day. The other thing we run into a lot, one of the reasons people upgrade to the full contact center is you can't log in and out of multiple work groups. Let's say I'm a member of customer service and tech support, and I want to stop taking calls in tech support. So I hit log out. It logs me out of tech support and customer service. I can't pick and choose to only log out of one of my 2 work groups. It logs me out of all of them and into all of them at the exact same time. So there is a limitation on being able to log in and out of individual. It is fully supported if you upgrade to a full contact center solution. You do have that ability to log in and out of individual queues. It's just a limitation on work groups. And the main reason is if they give you all that capability, then there's not as much benefit to upgrading to a full contact center solution. Last limitation here that I'm listing is it ignores your call handling mode. So if I'm logged into a work group, but I put my phone in out of office or on vacation mode, the work group doesn't care. I'm in extended absence because I'm on vacation. I'm taking my kids to Disneyland. My phone's going to ring for the full 10 days I'm gone. It doesn't, whatever day, how many ever days I'm gone. Work groups don't care about your call handling modes. Call handling modes will still be applied for DID calls and extension calls. They'll follow your call handling mode, but work group calls will continue to ring the phone even if the users put themselves in out of office or do not, in a meeting mode or something like that. It does ignore call handling modes. Which is good and bad. The reason, the original setting up when I talked to the ShoreTel engineers around that is they set it that way so that users could maybe put themselves in a meeting and stop taking internal calls, but still be able to take customer calls. That was the original design for that feature. I don't know if that, really, does what they thought or not, but that was the kind of reason behind the ignoring of the call handling modes. From a redundancy standpoint, best practices standpoint, workgroups also have a backup extension setting when you're configuring a workgroup, and that backup extension setting can be used to set up, if the server goes down, that backup extension could be a workgroup on a different server for redundancy purposes, or it could be even a hunt group like we talked about earlier, so that if the server has an issue, you can have some redundancies with another workgroup on a different server or a hunt group to provide you the full system redundancy that we usually talk to with customers is minimizing the single points of failure. A workgroup on a server could be a single point of failure because that server is providing workgroup, voicemail, auto attendant. That server goes down. We need another server to be able to take those calls, inbound calls from customers. All right, I think I hit through all my good. I see a couple of questions come in, so I'm going to hop over here and answer some questions that came in here. If you have questions, feel free to to drop them into the question thing and I'll kind of hit through these questions. If for some reason I can't answer a question, then I'll follow up. We'll follow up via email with an answer to those questions. So, question here says, for workgroups, when you say 300 agents per system for work, does that mean per site, with each site with a DVS, or overall? So let me flip back a screen here. So this is the workgroup agents total per system. So we can have 300 agents per system. That means if we have 10 servers that are hosting workgroups, between all 10 servers, we can only have 300 agents. One agent, like I said, can be a member of 5 workgroups, but that agent only counts as one agent. So you can have up to 300 employees that are members of workgroups in your whole ShoreTel system. So the limitation is system-wide, not server-wide. So yeah, example is you have one site and 4 DVSs or one headquarters and 4 DVSs between all 5 servers. You can have 300 agents. And like I said, it's different agents, so not the same agent, on that. So we have some customers that have had, I don't know, maybe in the 200s, but I've never ran across quite that. Typically those customers, when you start to get that big, we start looking at the contact center system. Another question coming in, it says, when you're using workgroups as voicemail only, users do not need to have a workgroup supervisor license to see those messages, right? So if you're on an older version of ShoreTel and we use a workgroup for voicemail, I could put agents in there, and then the voicemail box would pop up in your desktop client, so you could see those voicemails and manage them. In the newer versions, they fix that like kind of loophole. So now if I put voicemails into a workgroup, you have to have an agent or a supervisor license in order to see those voicemails in the client. We can do email notifications still, and they can check them via phone, but if they want to see the voicemail in the client, they do have to have an agent or supervisor license. It didn't always used to be like that. So if you're an old school, ShoreTel, you've had it for a while. I started back in version 6, and up until I think version 14-ish, you could see the voicemails in the client without having a license. And then they said, well, they said it was a defect when they fixed it, and we asked about it. So in the newer versions, you have to have a license in order to see the voicemails in the client itself. Kind of a bummer, but that's a current limitation now. Let's see, another question here is, when utilizing hunt groups, what reporting metrics are available? Good question. I think I said there was 5 or 6 reporting metrics available to hunt groups. So things you can see when you run a hunt group report is I can see the number of calls, how many calls came into the hunt group. Was it 100? Great. I can see call counts. In that call count, I can see how many of them were abandoned or not answered. I can see how many of them were answered, I can see how many of them were forwarded off, so maybe we sent it to a no answer destination. I can also see how many of them went to a voicemail box. I can see ring time, so what was the average ring time before a call got answered, and then what was the average talk time. So did we talk for 5 minutes on average, per call? So those are the kind of the metrics I can see. Utilizing Bright Metrics, I can change those calls either between a number and a %. So if I wanted to see what was the number of abandoned calls or what was the percentage of abandoned calls, it's the same metrics. We're just changing, from a number to a percentage. So, but those are kind of the metrics that we have available to Hunt Group. Let's see here, another question here. If you're wanting a community voicemail box for Hunt Groups, is there a way to do this? So the only way we can use that, there's 2 ways we can do voicemail boxes for Hunt Groups, is either via a work group or via a route point. Those are really our only 2 options that we can utilize, or we could utilize a user, but I would never recommend using a user license just for voicemail. It's going to cost, you're going to pay $100 just to use a voicemail box as a user, when you could utilize, a work group or a route point for those for free with no cost, associated with those. So you can utilize the workgroup or a route point as a voicemail box and do email notification to a distribution list or something like that at no cost. The only thing that you'd have to pay for is if you wanted the users to be able to see the voicemail in their client. But if you don't care about necessarily seeing the client, if you're fine with them calling in or listening to them via a WAV file in their email, you could utilize the workgroup or the route point for a free voicemail box for Hunt Groups, or even for auto attendants. Let's see, another question here. when utilizing a work group, what supervisor tools are available? So if you have a supervisor license, in the client, you're going to get what's called the agent manager. So there's two windows that you get in the client. You get the queue monitor, which shows you all the different queues, but you also get the agent manager. The agent manager lets you see the list of all your agents that are in your work groups that you're managing. You can then click on any of those agents. You can log them in, you can log them out, you can put them in wrap-up, you can take them out of wrap-up. You can right-click on a call on a user, and you can record their call if you have the permission for that. You can silent monitor, so you can listen to that call. You can coach, which means you're listening to them. You can tell them, whisper into them, say, hey, don't forget to mention that we have a sale coming up, or something like that. You can also barge into the call. So if you're listening to a call and it's not going very well, you can hit the barge in button, force yourself into the call, and say, hey customer, this is Chris Mitchell. I'm the supervisor, with Inflow. I'm going to go ahead and take over this call. So you can kind of use the barge-in capabilities as well from a supervisor. So those are kind of your supervisor tools available. One other thing you can do as a supervisor is you can shut down your queues. So if you're looking at your customer service queue, but you need to have an all-hands meeting, from the queue monitor window, you can click on the queue and you can say, you can move it from off hours to, from on hours to off hours. You can toggle the queues open or closed. Obviously, there's a schedule that does it, but as a supervisor with the permissions, that you can toggle that queue between on hours and off hours as well. Another question here, will this presentation recording be available? Yes, we do record all of these and we make them available. You can send us an email if you want a copy of it. We do take some of these and we kind of split them up and put them on our YouTube channel for different, question, topics and stuff like that. But we do make the whole recording available with the audio and the screen sharing. Simply send us an email asking for a copy. We'll send you a link so you can download and maybe have different team members listen to these meetings as well, or these trainings. So yeah, feel free to send us an email. Also, if you have other questions that you come up with, feel free to send us an email. Put in a call to us or to your account manager if you want a conversation with one of our sales engineers. We're always happy to answer those questions and help out wherever we can when it comes to designing the system, expanding the system, or a lot of calls we have with customers lately is around disaster recovery. How can we build redundancy into the system? We're always happy to have those conversations to help build as much DR in redundancy into your system as possible. Obviously, there's some stuff that costs, but we do try to build a lot of the redundancy in minimizing costs at the same time. All right. Well, I think that was all the questions we had. So I'm trying to keep these to about 30 minutes instead of an hour, just to kind of free up some more time in everybody's day. So if I don't see any other questions come in, I'd like to thank everybody for joining and look forward to seeing you on a future webinar with us. If you have any recommendations for topics, feel free to send us an email. We're always interested to hear what topics our customers are wanting us to cover, and we'll gladly get that topic assigned to an engineer and put it on our calendar. So thanks for everybody for joining today, and have a good day.